According to the World Health Organization, of the 17 million premature deaths under the age of 70 due to non-communicable diseases in 2019, 38% were caused by cardiovascular diseases. Yet we know that cardiovascular diseases are predictable, manageable, reversible, and preventable. What are the key challenges getting in the way of innovation? Can we learn from other diseases like oncology? What are the right things to do for patients? Please welcome Mariel Jessup, Chief Science and Medical Officer, American Heart Association, and Fayez Zanad, Emeritus Professor of Therapeutics and Cardiology, Université de Lorraine, INSERM and Chairman, CVCT, Paris, France.
Mariel, and we are from both sides of the Atlantic, and you have been extremely active in the worldwide cardiology, and certainly from the United States. But the interest of our discussion today that we may be having looks from both sides of the Atlantic. We have been over wonderful progresses in many areas, and certainly in one of the areas we share is the heart failure, but many other areas. But I'm sure there are frustration and where we'd like things to move on, and so to say, if we have a chance to have a call for action, what would be your priority call for action?
Well, thank you, and yes, we have. We've been privileged, you and I, to watch great progress in a variety of cardiovascular diseases. But I'm going to steal the call to action that we have at the American Heart Association, and that is what we call our 2024 impact goal, which is the 100th year anniversary of the American Heart Association. And what we say is that every person deserves the opportunity for a full and healthy life. And that has so many parts to making that happen. It means that we have to have better discovery. We have to have empowering our scientists to find new approaches to disease. It means that we have to solve the problem of access to good care. It means we have to solve the problem of implementing great care that's available. You and I've talked in the past about how do we get clinicians to do the right thing, which are outlined in the guidelines, but people don't follow them. And it's also really trying to understand that there's so much of cardiovascular disease and stroke that can be prevented. So when we say every person deserves the opportunity for a full and healthy life, that means we have to hit all of those areas. And so that's what I do think about a lot in my role, and how to implement that in all the different domains. How about you? What do you worry about?
You're right, and actually you are hitting on two very important topics. One is the implementation of what we have as evidence already, and certainly in improving healthy aging. And for example, we really know how to lower blood pressure, but still so many people are uncontrolled. We have uncontrolled blood pressure. So implementation science and improving the implementation policy of having blood pressure under control, just simple. And we have the evidence, right? But of course, on the other side is growing with new evidence for new strategy of primary and primordial prevention. And certainly this is very important in our respective countries, but worldwide, I mean, globally, the cardiovascular prevention is kind of forgotten. There is lots of intensive work in treating the diseases, alleviating symptoms, and progresses with new medication every year. But the main challenge of prevention is, of course, running trials, because these trials will be 10,000 patients over 10 years follow-up if we have to be stuck with the morbidity, mortality endpoints. So we need to be creative in order to get these primordial or primary prevention trials, and likely, rely on some sort of surrogacy, right? With blood pressure and cholesterol was very easy because these are two very strong surrogates, right? But in healthy aging, we need to rely on other surrogates. And I would really advocate a call for action for more work on validating surrogates. These may be intensive multi-omic universal surrogates, for example, or any other sorts of surrogates. And we need to have more intense work onto this in order to prepare for evidence-based primary primordial prevention. Do you think so?
Well, absolutely. I think, however, that all of the promises that we hear about so often, for instance, technology and personal devices, and all of us work daily with electronic medical records, but we haven't figured out a way to harness that all. So that too often technology, first of all, not everyone can afford the technology that's out there, like the special watches or all kinds of fancy blood pressure monitoring devices. And they aren't integrated into an electronic medical record so that they're sort of standalone, capturing information that may be getting to an individual person, but not necessarily to that person's providers or clinicians. And then, at least in the United States, we spent billions of dollars developing electronic medical records, but there's still great barriers to capitalizing on the rich information that's there. But as we've been working to think about solutions and research funding into these solutions, I personally am very convinced that we need to come together as countries and say, what can we do? Just as you say, yes, we need clinical trials, but we need to be able, because we want to have a diverse enrollment, and we want to have sort of a longitudinal enrollment. Not any single company can pay for that, and not even any single country can pay for that. But by doing very simple trials and engaging the community to tackle these individual problems, and perhaps tackling them with the added information that we can get from these personal devices, I think that's the promise in the future, so that we have a community of people wearing a blood pressure monitor, that they may agree that it will all come together on a single platform, and that different countries will agree on some specific issues that we need to address. That's what I'd love to see happen in the future. We're doing baby steps around that. I know that would excite you because you're instrumental in thinking about trials to answer questions.
Yeah, well, going pragmatic and promoting simple trials is certainly high in the agenda, and we are making progress, but much slower than in the oncology field, for example. And you are really right into highlighting the importance of electronic health records, and which would make trials much easier. And certainly we are making progress, certainly in Europe, and we have this example of the Sweetheart and the many randomized registry trials, which has done wonderful progress in this field. And the other unmet need, and for me, is that trials are conducted mainly in Western world, and a whole part of the world in Asia, in Africa, and Middle East are not part of the trials, and not part of the evidence generation effort, the global efforts. And how to make this diversity happen, it's going to be challenging, especially if we go digital, because in these countries, they are going to be experiencing the same issues, and maybe more than the issues you and me are having in our respective countries. So I wonder, what is your experience into with diversity within trials, with ethnic diversity of representation of more women, with mainly underrepresented trials, but also geographical diversity. What is your experience and what would you recommend? How to overcome these issues?
Well, I think the good news, I'll tell you what we're doing at the American Heart Association, because I'm very proud that we've really, made an effort to do this. But I also want to say that the American Heart Association is part of a global cardiovascular funders, and they've just agreed that we're going to work together. Cardiovascular funders all over the world are going to work together around health equity and tackle one of these issues, which is what I think has to happen. I also think that we have to engage our industry partners to help us with this, and we need to all work together around a common goal. We at the American Heart Association have a funding model called Strategically Focused Research Network, and it's 4 or 5 centers that come together to form a network around a specific topic. And we're about to finish the second round of peer review for a strategically focused research network on the science of diverse enrollment in clinical trials. So we've challenged investigators to bring their ideas about really sort of demonstration projects about how to make sure that we're getting diverse enrollment. How do we engage communities so that there's community-based participatory research? How do we partner with other organizations besides hospitals or medical centers? So I'm very excited about the science that will come out of this. I think it's important to call it science and publish the results and say, this is the first set of scientifically proven ways to ensure diverse enrollment. Interestingly, we do have some partners in this. So it's not just American Heart Association paying for that. We have a foundation that's committed to adding their dollars, as well as an industry partner. So I without bursting with pride, I will say that's a model that I think is very important as we go forward. So public-private collaboration around a multi-center network that will commit to working on the science of different projects.
Yeah, you must be congratulated for this. This is really very important. But there is the hypothesis out there as well that you may increase diverse patient population and participating in trials if you increase diversity among trial leadership, right? So you are a great example, and we have been with the CVCT initiative initiating this future trialist in training, embedding young trialists from diversity into major trial steering committees and let them learn the job. So it is still a hypothesis that diverse trial leadership will improve diversity of patient participation, but it is very reasonable hypothesis. So anything in that sense you are doing from the American Heart or other places in the promoting trial leadership, diversity in trial leadership?
Well, I think that's great, and the work you're doing is just so important. Every one of our funding models that involves multi-centers always has a training component. So there's a training component in this SFRN around the science of diverse enrollment, and in all of our other health equity research networks as well. We have always been concerned about training the next generation. Which reminds me about something else that's really important, and that is the scientists of old no longer sit in their own office and work in their own labs and write their own notes. And we have to really understand what the future of scientific discovery will look like, and we have to give the tools to these scientists to work together, whether they're in Africa or England or the United States. They need to be able to not just talk by Zoom like we are and like the world has done for the last 2 years, but they need to have secure, cloud-based, high-speed computing power so that they can work together in a workspace and analyze the data and catalyze the thinking of one another. That is one of the powers of a research network like Leduc Foundation has been doing for years. And it's bringing together senior and junior investigators into an environment where their ideas just explode, but we need to give them the tools to work together around their data as well. And I think that's something that industry has discovered faster than we have in academic medicine, maybe, that they're bringing together their scientists in a more opportune way and finding ways for them to work together. And we have to learn from that, I think.
Yeah, well, that's a great example you're taking here. But one other challenge is very important is how much we are learning from oncologists. Over the last 10 years, there have been tens of new oncology drugs approved, while there was only a handful of cardiovascular drugs. So what is your own take on this? And of course, there are many other lessons we can learn from oncologists, and certainly they're very straightforward, biomarker-based, more reliance on surrogates, etc. Are we making things too complicated in cardiovascular? I don't think personally. I still think that the evidence we are generating, which life-saving medication is essential, or shall we make it easier for cardiovascular using maybe conditional approval or other stuff in order to tease back investors into cardiovascular, because we are facing an issue.
It's so true. You know, as you well know, 1 in 3 people all over the world will die from cardiovascular disease. Every single person's lives are touched by cardiovascular disease. And so I think you're right. We have to make it easier, and we have to target diseases that are common. And we have to come up with novel ways of solving the problem. So for instance, we all know that there are great therapies to treat aortic stenosis, for example. But the fact of the matter is, no matter where you go in the world, people with aortic stenosis are under-recognized, under-treated, not followed carefully. And so if we can get industry to articulate the problem they're trying to solve with their therapy or with their drug, I think we can partner with them and solve it. And it may be that we can tackle little parts of the problem at a time. So it may not be just a trial to test the efficacy of a drug. It may be a trial to say, what system change can we make that will detect more patients with aortic stenosis, as an example. And so I think we have to take the big problem of cardiovascular disease and stroke and break it down into parts that we can likewise try to test for in clinical trials. We've been so dependent on industry and governments funding us that we perhaps maybe have stopped coming up with our own ideas and our own observations about what kinds of things need to be changed. And so I would hope we can do more of that we can come together to sort of look at a high level and say, we have to do better at hypertension, but we have to find those people. We have to monitor them long term. We have to do better at getting people to stop smoking. All the mainstays, we have to figure out a way to add your expertise to solving the problems. And I think the more we come together across the world, we'll be even more powerful. So that's being somewhat optimistic. It's a lot of work, and there are people that are going to have to come behind me to finish that up, because I don't think I'll be able to do that in my lifetime. But we should aim for that. We should outline the blue sky, as we say.
Yeah, well, persistence is very important, and you are right on to pinpointing this, but creativity is also important. And I know that everybody taken the example of this pandemic and how creative we have been into doing simple, cheap, fast trials. But still, this is the COVID trials where the event rate is very high and patients were available for enrollment much easier than cardiovascular. So I would like to dampen the enthusiasm of people taking the example of COVID, say, hey, they have done it. Why we cannot do it in the cardiovascular? It's not so simple. And we need really to highlight the driving process behind making cardiovascular trials so expensive and complex.
I think we have to learn more about how Sweden's doing it. Japan has been doing a big clinical trial program and has been very successful. And so I think we have to celebrate and learn from the successes that are out there, and be willing to speak out from whatever platforms we have to assure our industry partners that we can do things without spending too much money. And we have to find lots of ways to encourage a partnership with people that want to bring both devices and pharma to help our patients, because the need is so great.
Yeah, you are mentioning devices, and it's wonderful the type of progress we have done with devices in cardiovascular, and the innovative space is being extremely fertile in this space, maybe more than in the drug space, by the way, but also because the regulators are making it simpler for devices with this expedited access pathway, the 21st Century Act in the United States. Unfortunately, we're going backward in the other direction in Europe. In Europe, the device industry will not find it easy to develop their trials. And I'm here really calling for action from this side of the Atlantic, that we get to harmonize the needs and the effort and the development landscape with the United States and with the FDA. This is really very important, because we need this, collaboration in order to make progress faster and this innovation come to market faster.
If we could do one thing particularly well, and there are ways to actually even look this, the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation in University of Washington can actually show what would happen if we took the world and, for instance, abolished smoking, what that would look like. And there is discernible, meaningful impact. So if the world could come together and say, we will no longer allow cigarettes, in 10 years, we could see a meaningful impact, and not only just on cardiovascular disease and stroke, but on cancer as well. So it's interesting to look at that statement and say, well, why aren't we doing that? What are the barriers that are standing in the way of countries all over the world coming together and saying, we're going to stop this? And I think that's where we leave science and get into the world, economics and politics and advocacy. So I may stop there and see what Fayez's predictions will be for 10 years.
If we do things right, and we know that cardiovascular diseases are predictable, they are manageable, and they are reversible, preventable. We know that, right? So if we do everything right, we can really fix the majority of cardiovascular diseases. And we do have an example, by the way, in Finland and in some other countries, when they've been after primordial prevention with a massive effort on lifestyle, on food, smoking, etc. It started in the 70s, 80s. And the dramatic change in the landscape of cardiovascular diseases, which plunged literally in terms of epidemiology. So we know that we can achieve that, but can we do things right worldwide? We can certainly try on a country basis, on a state basis, whatever. But if we go, worldwide, we will have many other challenges, and most of them, in my opinion, are dominated by two main challenges: the inequity within the worldwide, the income inequity, and the poverty in the world, and of course the climate change and the pollution. We tend to forget that pollution is among the very first risk factor, cardiovascular, also cancer, by the way, and cardiovascular. So if we can do things right, like we are learning from specific countries when it comes to lifestyle, etc., if we can do everything right into controlling climate change and pollution, then I'm sure we will reverse the trend, and cardiovascular may not be #1 killer anymore.
Well, there's a lot to do, but I think that we can make progress because there's great innovation out there. So it's so nice to have talked to you.
Thank you so much, Marielle. It has been a delight. Thank you so much.